38% of university students would leave Hong Kong if given the chance. What's happening with the Hong Kong dollar? It's pegged to the US dollar. What does that mean?
When the Hong Kong dollar pegs from the US dollar, there's going to be a lot of people that make an obscene amount of money. So there's a trust with a Hong Kong dollar that, hey, this is as if it's a company. This is a well-run part of the world. If they're holding a currency that's pegged to the US dollar, which is the most powerful currency in the world, you can hold that currency for a while and you're not going to lose a ton of value. This is one of those situations that comes around in the world very rarely, where you have a major currency that could have a major shift. You make a lot of money from it.
All right, welcome episode 3 of the Adventure Capitalist Podcast. I am fired up today, man. I am so excited to talk about this topic. My name's Austin Bronner. This is my co-host, Cody Shirk. And this podcast, we are diving into stories that get a little bit overlooked, but are big on the global stage. We're going to talk about business, adventure. We're going to talk about diving into places to make money in areas most people won't even touch or aren't even thinking about. And today we are excited because we're talking about a very interesting topic to me, and that is what is going on in Hong Kong. Specifically, why Hong Kong has transitioned from being really this jewel in Asia into a city that you could argue is kind of dying.
Yeah, and I will also mention that both you and I kind of have an emotional attachment to the city.
For sure.
It was it was my favorite city in the entire world.
It was my favorite city in the entire world.
Yeah. Which is hard to say because I'm a U.S. guy. I'm like, what, Cody? You're just this gringo guy. What are you doing in Hong Kong? How can this be your favorite city? And I'll explain a little later. But I just wanted to say that.
Are you still a gringo in Hong Kong?
Yeah, like around the world, it's kind of like a self-deprecating term. If you say gringo, it's like, yeah, you're that like token American.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say that we're not just some randoms talking about Hong Kong like we've never been there. I've spent a lot of time there. I still have friends that are there. A lot have moved from there. You were living right next to there?
I lived in Macau for a year, spent, I would say, 50% of my weekends in Hong Kong for over a year.
Right. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think it would be easy for a listener to say, who are these two dudes talking about Hong Kong? How do they know what's going on? But yeah, Hong Kong was my favorite city in the world. I'm a huge food guy, and if anybody's been to Hong Kong before,
it's one of the best.
I mean, I can't really think of many places that even come close to comparing to Hong Kong when it comes to the food scene. And then you throw in the transportation, the walkability, the safety, the cultural experience, the blending of essentially the entire world coming there, meshing, and everything just works strangely. It was an incredible place.
Incredible. And incredible airport that could launch you anywhere in Asia. I mean, it still can. It's still an incredible airport. But yeah, the city is fantastic. And it's experiencing significant amounts of changes. We've got many people are leaving Hong Kong.
Yeah. So quick background on Hong Kong. What is it? Where is it? It's on the southern part of China. It's basically like this island. Part of Hong Kong actually is an island, but the territory, which is a SAR, which is a special administration region of China, which was the British came in there, developed it, made it a British colony. They handed it over back to China in the late 90s, and China, over the past couple of decades, has been transforming it back into China. But it really accelerated during COVID. Essentially, it went back to China altogether, culturally, but also law-wise, freedom-wise. All these different things changed. So just for the listener, if you've never been to Hong Kong, don't know much about it, it was this free British colony. I'm using air quotes on it because it was still technically part of China, but it was governed differently. Everything about it was different. Even when you came into the airport, your passport check was different than if you went to mainland China.
And the people culturally, it's different as well, right? So I lived in Macau for a year. I was teaching English there at the University of Macau. And the Macau people are culturally a little bit different than Hong Kong people. And Hong Kong people are different than mainland Chinese people. Macau people and Hong Kong people there's more overlap between mindsets, kind of like views, than Hong Kong people and mainland Chinese. and there's always been some friction there. And when the Chinese took back Hong Kong from the British, that friction only increased. And over the last 2 decades, as it's continued to increase, it's shifted from a democracy to de facto Chinese rule. They've started to jail pro-democracy activists, all of this creating more and more friction. There's a story that came out a couple of days ago that they jailed like 14 pro-democracy activists who were demonstrating during kind of the COVID times when they really locked down the city. So lots of interesting backstory in Hong Kong. And it's just important to know, like, culturally, there's a big difference between how people think about themselves. And this is as we dive into like what's happening with Hong Kongers and where they're going and why they're leaving the city, that's just important to remember that it's not the same. It's not the same. It's a different place.
Yeah, and to be clear also, if you're from Hong Kong, you're recognized or culturally referred to as a Hong Konger or
Yes.
Hong Kongese versus Chinese. There's a different passport. It's very much different. So maybe culturally going back hundreds of years, there's a connection there, but modern days is very much a separation. And we're not going to dive too deep in that. I think we've already gone over some of it. What
Sure.
we want to talk about today is what's going on right now, what's going to happen in the future, what do we think is going to happen, and where are the opportunities?
Yeah.
And where are the opportunities now that Hong Kong has changed? Because people have left there, opportunities have left, companies have moved, and where are they going? So if Hong Kong was this important place in the world, what's going to happen next?
And it's hard to start anywhere else except with the Hong Kong dollar. And to give a little bit of a context around, back to the point, different passports, different culture, different currency. So they use the Hong Kong dollar in Hong Kong, and they don't use the Chinese yuan. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening with the Hong Kong dollar. Can you maybe explain? It's pegged to the U.S. dollar. What does that mean?
Yep. So just as you said, Austin, Hong Kong issues its own currency. And it's actually kind of weird because you have a Hong Kong dollar and it has the name of a bank. And it's usually HSBC. It's on the paper money, which is weird because you think a private company that... Anyways, the point is that Hong Kong issues their own currency, which is separate from China. Why that matters is a couple different reasons. Number one, there's a reputation with Hong Kong being better managed and more transparent than mainland China, which uses the yuan. So there's a trust with a Hong Kong dollar that, hey, this is as if it's a company. This is a well-run part of the world, Hong Kong. We're going to trust this currency. We're going to do trade in this currency. We're going to buy equities of this currency. And I'm going to hold this paper money in my wallet to buy a beer at night or whatever.
Yeah.
So Hong Kong has had this great reputation. And it's also convenient because it's pegged to the U.S. dollar. There's lots of currencies throughout the world that are pegged to the U.S. dollar. And essentially what that does for the local economy there is it makes them confident that if they're holding a currency that's pegged to the U.S. dollar, which is the most powerful currency in the world, you can hold that currency for a while, whether it's 6 months, a year, and you're not going to lose a ton of value. You can
be able to redeem it for the same amount.
It's fungible. You can reliably go to a store, buy something. You can also wire money from one bank account to another, and there's a currency transaction, but it's 1-to-1 for the U.S. dollar. So it could go on and on, but you get the point. It's a reliable source of storage of wealth for someone to live their life. So the reason why it's very important right now is because that peg may depeg. And what that means is that the Hong Kong dollar, it may lose the peg to the U.S. dollar. And for a trader, a currency trader, or an investor, or someone who's listening to this podcast thinking like, why the hell should I worry about this currency in Hong Kong? And the best example is George Soros, Jim Rogers, and Stan Druckenmiller, who broke the Bank of England. And what they did is they looked at the currency arbitrage situation and they said, hey, if I take one bet against one currency and another bet against another currency, if those currencies flip, meaning the spread between the value of those two currencies exaggerates, then I can make a ton of money. And in Soros's case, when he broke the Bank of England, he made like $1 billion in a day or something crazy like that. This has happened all around the world many times with currency traders, but the Hong Kong dollar is a prime target for this situation because if I should say when. I don't want to forecast too much, but when the Hong Kong dollar depegs from the US dollar, there's going to be a lot of money or a lot of people that make an obscene amount of money.
And people that lose money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's two sides of that trade there, right?
Yep.
There's going to be a wipe out of wealth on one side, and there's going to be an enormous amount of wealth made on the other side. And to be clear, you don't have to go to Hong Kong to do this. You
No.
could be sitting in your basement in the middle of the US, and you could be making this trade. So from an adventure capitalist kind of, hey, I'm going to do this from abroad, this is one of those situations that comes around in the world very rarely, where you have a major currency that could have a major shift, and you make a lot of money from it. So that's kind of where the Hong Kong dollar...
Timing is important because it's been talked about for the last couple of years. Bill Ackman's been talking about it. He said he took a position against the Hong Kong dollar like 2 years ago. Has that paid off yet? No. But we don't know when it's going to happen, but it's likely that it will happen.
Yeah, and Bill Ackman's a perfect example. He's this famous hedge fund guy. And by the way, I just read today, he's considering taking his hedge fund public. So the past couple of years, he's been very public on social media and Twitter, getting on these kind of public arguments with all kinds of like Harvard University and all that.
Yeah.
But part of his activist, strategy is that if he takes a certain bet on a company or a currency, and he becomes more and more famous in the public eye, and then they say, oh, Bill Ackman's this guy doing X, Y, Z, and then they go, oh, also he took a trade against the Hong Kong dollar. That's going to help him because other people are going to copy that trade, and it's going to pile on to the bet against or for the depeg of the Hong Kong dollar versus the US dollar. And again, it's my opinion that it will eventually depeg. I don't know when.
Yeah.
But when it does happen, it's gonna send waves through the financial system, especially in Asia.
One interesting kind of side note on that is that the Macau dollar is also pegged to the US dollar.
Yeah.
But what's very interesting is it's pegged a little bit differently. So I think it's might be off. It's like 7.7 or 7.7 to 1 and like 7.8 to 1 or something like that. Macau dollars are worth a little bit less. And the reason that they do that is that when you go to gamble in Macau, you can only gamble in Hong Kong dollars, but everything else you transact in Macau dollars. And it's so close that for the most part, people will come over to Hong Kong or from Hong Kong, or they'll come from mainland or whatever. They'll convert to Hong Kong dollars. They'll gamble, and then they'll take those Hong Kong dollars, which are worth a little bit more than the Macau dollars, and they'll go and use those to buy food and all the other things. And so all the stores get a little bit of a spread because people, they just accept Hong Kong dollars and Macau dollars as the exact same thing, and they don't give you any difference, even though there is a difference in value. And then they take them and they redeem them, and they can turn them into Macau dollars and make a little bit.
Yeah, and for anybody listening who's like, what the hell are these guys talking
Yeah.
about? Spreads and all that stuff. This is known as arbitrage. So basically, you're doing...
The city has an arbitrage
Yep.
at all times that the casinos are running.
Exactly. And you can think of arbitrage if you're like a little kid, you're selling lemonade and you're getting lemons off a tree for pennies, and then you're selling them to your neighbor for $1, and like there's an arbitrage on that money you're making there. And that's a very simplistic example, but this is what traders do at huge volume with currencies around the world, and specifically with Hong Kong, Macau, and mainland China. That'll probably be a whole nother episode we can dive into, but this is a financial engineering marvel of the China and Asia region, what's going on in Hong Kong, or has been going on for the past couple of decades.
Totally.
And it's kind of like this wink, wink, nod, nod, like, Dad, this thing works, but it's changed, and it's changing right now. And that's what I want to dive into more with you, which is...
Where are people going?
Yeah, where are they going?
This is like, to give some context, Hong Kong, incredible, thriving, international city, the jewel of Asia. People wanted to go there, and they wanted to spend their time there. I wanted to go there. Like the first time I visited Hong Kong, I think I was 19 years old, maybe 20 years old. Stopped on the way to going to India and spent 3 or 4 days there. I was so blown away. I was like, I gotta come back. And I thought I wanted to move there. I was like, I want to move here. This city is so incredible. It made such an impact on me that I actually, in my last year of university, I tailored pretty much everything I was doing to get a job in Hong Kong. So I applied for a Fulbright fellowship to Macau because it was less competitive than Hong Kong. So I could go live in Macau to try to get a job in Hong Kong because I was so blown away by how spectacular the city was and how I thought that was the place I wanted to be. So imagine that, vacuuming in all the smartest people in Asia and around the world to this beautiful, dynamic New York style city in Asia. And now, fast forward to today, those people are leaving at an alarming rate.
Yeah, and so again, I don't want to dive too much into Hong Kong if you've never been there, but you said it perfectly. I would say it's a combination of New York, Miami, Las Vegas, London, and any other cool city you've ever been to. It works. It's an incredible city, but they're leaving now, and the reason they're leaving is because we discussed before. It's essentially untenable for people to live there under this new Chinese regime.
Totally.
Business has gotten more difficult. The prosecution of freedom advocates has become alarming, terrifying. The ability for you to travel in and out of the region is becoming much more difficult, and I could go on and on. Essentially,
it's still incredibly expensive. So the value of a tiny apartment is still incredibly high. That was still a problem back then, like back 20 years ago, 15 years ago.
But it was worth it then. I would pay.
It was
that,
worth it.
Yeah.
And I think psychologically, I mentioned this at the beginning, the difference between a Hong Konger and someone who's mainland Chinese is when you have something and you have it taken away, it's very different than not having something and getting it for the first time. And having, right to, let's say, free speech, right? Effectively living under like a British style of administration and government, and then having that taken away, I think is a lot more painful than living without a lot of, let's just say, like rights and freedoms and then gaining them. It's just not the same.
Yeah, it's like the whole it's the airline analogy where airlines never had TVs on their headrests. And so now airlines have TVs in their headrests. Everyone's like, "Oh, this is great, I have entertainment." And then like the TV breaks, and they're like, "I want a refund."
Exactly.
And they're like, "Well, a year ago you didn't even have a TV. Why are you freaking out?" So, but where are they going? So you mentioned the best, brightest from around the world. I would obviously from Asia. So people came from Korea, Thailand, all over Indonesia. They would go to Hong Kong because that was the financial hub of the region. But it wasn't just them. It was people from the U.S. going there. I have several friends.
U.S. London.
Top graduates from the top Ivy League universities. They went to Hong Kong. Yeah. They went to Hong Kong because they made an insane amount of money. There was more opportunity there than anywhere else in the world. So this really was the crown jewel for financially literate or superstars to go and do business. That's changed. Where are they going? So we'll talk about that right now. The top cities where they're going is probably Singapore is number one, and Singapore has traditionally been well known as a Hong Kong competitor.
Yep.
Probably was number two for a while just because Hong Kong had a head start from Singapore, and Singapore's got some ways of the way they run their city is a little bit too strict for some people. Hong Kong was interesting because you could like drink out in the streets and get in these like rowdy like parties, and the next morning they just like bleach the sidewalks and like power wash.
It has more grit.
Yeah, it has more grit.
Yeah.
Singapore, you got to be more careful of that. The whole chewing gum law that everyone talks about. That's a perfect example of why Singapore never really took off like Hong Kong. But now that's where people are going. So if you were a superstar in Asian finance, you've probably moved to Singapore. If it wasn't Singapore, you may have gone to Bangkok. You've maybe gone to Tokyo, to Seoul, Sydney. Mostly
Dubai.
Dubai, the major cities in the region. And a lot of people went back to New York, went back to Toronto, went back to Los Angeles, San Francisco. So you have this exodus of people going back to where they came from or going to the next best, which is, again, Singapore right now.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you're talking about two different groups. Mm-hmm. You're talking about, let's say, expats, right? And those expats are no longer relocating there, and they're relocating some other places, which is one group. And then you've actually got Hong Kongers who are leaving Hong Kong, lifelong Hong Kongers who are leaving Hong Kong and trying to go to other places. And these groups are a little bit different, right? Because the thing that I find more fascinating is that the Hong Kongers are trying to get out, mm-hmm. right? And there's a poll that says that 38% of university students would leave Hong Kong if given the chance. And that was up 10% over the previous year. This is post-COVID. So as they went through COVID, things locked down, got crazy. There was all those wild demonstrations. In the news, local pro-democracy activists are getting arrested. People are more and more likely to want to relocate. And when you think about 38%, that blows my mind with my experience being in a city that was so dynamic that I was like, what? I wanted to move literally across the earth to be there. And now you've got almost 40% of the university students saying, like, I want to go to London, get out. And again, they do have the opportunity to do this because their passports are different.
Yep. And you articulated it very well. I want to drive home the point, though, that there's a portion of the population that came to Hong Kong from other countries.
And they're not going there anymore.
Yeah, and that's more of it's a less emotional decision for them. It's purely professional financial. Like, oh, I'm going to Hong Kong. Now I'm going to Singapore. Now I'm going to Bangkok. Now I'm going back to New York.
And those people are always, it's like that trade, if you will, it's like that is always happening. There's cities out there that are more exciting, and they're always attracting people, expats to them. And Dubai is one of those interesting ones. I spent time with two British guys who lived in Dubai, and they live there now. They live there currently, and we're kind of laughing. It's like, when in history would two very smart British guys leave England and go to the Middle East outside of conducting military campaigns? Right. Very unlikely. They're like growing up, we never thought we were going to go live in Dubai, but Dubai is like, for them, the value proposition of living in Dubai versus living in London, so much better.
That's the two famous sayings, vote with your feet. I'm not going to go to the ballot box. I'm just going to walk to wherever I'm treated best. And that's what I was saying. People go where they're treated best.
Exactly.
And if they're not treated best in Hong Kong, they're going to go wherever they're treated best. And for sure, so from an outsider coming to Hong Kong, they're going to go where they're treated best. So if you're a U.S. citizen or a citizen from another country, you're going to go to the place that treats your citizenship the best compared to the financial situation that's going on. Again, Hong Kong traditionally was welcoming to almost everybody. That's shifted. But the other migration you're talking about is
locals.
And of course, Hong Kong itself, an incredible healthcare system, incredible education system, and the homegrown Hong Kongers, very intelligent, very successful, incredible amount of wealth there. They're leaving. And again, they're going to a lot of the cities that we've mentioned there. So what does it mean for listeners listening in? Because again, this is one of those things you can observe, and we already mentioned the Hong Kong dollar opportunity. I don't know when that's going to happen. Maybe it happens soon. Maybe it happens in a couple of years. Who knows? We should follow Bill Ackman, see what he's doing. I know there's going to be more, or there already are more hedge fund guys that are making huge bets on this. They're putting millions, if not billions of dollars on one side of the trade, which is, hey, this Hong Kong dollar will be worth, it won't be worth more than it will be worth more, meaning it'll be inflated away, but of purchasing power wise, it'll be buy you less.
Yeah.
So they're gonna make that trade. But for somebody listening to this, like, why does this matter? And it matters because of these new cities popping up that are attracting this capital and this talent. Singapore is one of them. Singapore is pretty difficult to get into if you're not a tourist, and that's because they require a very large amount of money to get your residency there. So we could dive into Singapore, but a more interesting cities that I think is somewhere like Bangkok, and Thailand is really taken off for a variety of reasons. It's much easier to go there, but there's a lot of financial institutions setting up there now.
And they just, I think it was like a couple days ago, they just launched a new visa. Mm-hmm. You see this?
Yep.
Yeah, it's like a 6-month digital nomad type visa for like, I think it was like $275.
Right, and that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
I'm gonna vote with my feet. I'm gonna go to where I'm treated best. Oh well, this place is offering me 6 months of this visa to be a digital nomad. Well, I'll go there and trade equities or do whatever I want to do as an investor.
Yeah.
But it just happens to be that the best and brightest that were in Hong Kong are now in Bangkok.
Totally.
So I can go network with these people, getting in on deals. Rub shoulders with the movers and shakers of the world, and it's in this country where I can party and drink Thai beer and eat great food, have
a great apartment.
Yep.
I mean, I'll never forget. I left. So my wife and I were dating. She went to the Peace Corps, went to Namibia, and after about 6 months, I was like, I gotta go see her. But first I wanted to go and
first
I wanted to go to a Muay Thai camp in Thailand. So I had an apartment in Santa Monica, and I was like, all right, Do I have enough money to go out there? Like, can I make this work financially for myself? I got rid of my apartment. I think I sublet it out, bought a ticket to Bangkok, and then flew up to Chiang Mai, lived in Thailand for 2 months, and I spent 50% of what I would have spent just being at home, not doing anything.
So it was cheaper to go on
It was
vacation.
cheaper with my flight, with my food, with my accommodation in Thailand. It was cheaper for me to fly across the world and spend 2 months than just live at home.
But were you in like hardcore fight camp where they were starving you and beating you? Is that why it was so cheap? Or was
No,
it
no,
nice?
no. I was at a Muay Thai camp, which
Okay.
was great, and we were like working out. It was just basically just did like 2 days every day. You just
Okay.
like, and then in the middle of the day, you'd go eat, you'd go hang out, and go explore. It was really fun, and it could work whatever. I was working on stuff, but I just like for those of you who think like, oh, it's super expensive to go abroad, and no. Going to someplace in Southeast Asia, it's often less expensive. You can, with the flight, it can be less expensive than remaining in the city that you're in currently. And so the point of like, what does it mean if you're younger and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, like maybe it makes sense and you're launching a business, maybe it makes sense to just relocate over there for a little while, lower your cost of living, use this incredible visa, $250, $270, you get 6 months to live somewhere, set up, get to work. And I think it's an incredible opportunity, and it's something that you'll also never forget.
Yeah, and Thailand, actually, they're also working on another type of regional visa for the Southeast Asian countries, kind of like the EU, where they're working on this visa where you can go to all these countries and travel easily as if you're in Europe, kind of going across borders, and there's no border crossings. You just go freely. They're working on that now. So
Yeah.
Again, as somebody listening to this saying, why does this matter? The world's changing. Everybody knows this.
Totally.
The power is changing. The currencies are changing. All of that. Whether or not Hong Kong is a catalyst for something bigger, it's certainly a symbolic, hey, this is not something that you're feeling in your gut and you can't really point to something. This is something you can point to and go, that is a big change in the world. That's a financial center that is essentially disintegrating. And the people and the capital and the opportunities are starting to spread out to other parts of Asia. What it means for China specifically, honestly, I'm still on the fence if it really means that much for I never really call it the country China because I've been corrected by many Chinese. It's the civilization of China. They've been around for thousands of years and they've been up and down. And so whether or not the fall, I'm going to call it the fall, but the disintegration of Hong Kong because it's been taken over by China means much for China. It certainly means a lot for the region. And for someplace like Thailand or Vietnam or Korea or Japan, you're going to have much more opportunity in these places. And for someone in the US or Latin America or Europe who wants to go to Asia, Hong Kong's just not really a spot anymore.
Sadly.
Yeah.
Sad. It's sad. It makes me sad.
Well, we want to go back, right?
Yeah. We're
I
just
still
talking
wanna
about
go
this. I it's interesting because you hear, this is one of those kind of like hypothesis, and then you got to go visit and check it out, right? Like you read about what's happening, you talk to people, and you form a picture, right? And we're talking about this here about what's happening. I'm very interested to go back and see for myself, like, how does it feel? Talk to people that are on the ground there, and then also go to mainland China, right? Because we live in this world where you are constantly getting information, hearing stories. It forms your worldview about what is out there. And one of my goals with this podcast is to just focus on opening up the worldview, because there, you might hear something about a place and then you go there and you feel like it's very, very different. So I'm super interested. It's, again, was my favorite city in the entire world. I always want to go back there and check it out. But yeah, just lots of change happening, and I think it's a big inspiration for me to remember to get back out there and go look at some of the places that are continuing to grow, thrive, and ask yourself
so we'll follow up on this topic when we go there.
We'll
right?
follow up, yeah, when we're eating dim sum.
Some dim sum.
We'll do a live podcast from all the dim sum on the table, drinking the tea. It's my happy place.
Yeah, and then we'll go to a Mai Tai camp.
There we go.
Kick my ass.
Awesome. Episode 3 in the books. Let us know what you think. Again, we're trying different things, so hit us up on Twitter at Abron, Austin Bronner,
At Cody Shirk.
at Cody Shirk. Let us know what you think. This is the Adventure Capitalist Podcast. Subscribe because that's going to help us out. And if you've got somebody who you think would enjoy this episode, shoot it their way.
Yeah, and let us know what you want to hear about too, because I feel like there's an unlimited amount of stories
There
around
is.
the world, and we've got a whole list and we're going to cover. But like, let us know because
Yeah, what are you interested in?
we want to dig in.
So, all right. Thank you.